Okay, this is session 2. B'ezras Hashem, next week will be session 3 before events of Purim. B'ezras Hashem will be actually Erev Tainus Esther, B'ezras Hashem. And then we'll have Pesach after Purim. This week, we'll look at this source to start off with. Obviously, there's so much to say about Purim. I have the book Redemption to Redemption. If you haven't bought it yet, you can get it online through Amazon, get it through me. You can get it in PDF format or hardcover format or softcover format, but it will go into a lot more detail that I'm going in right now. And the basic idea, though, we will discuss. I'm just going to share the screen over here. Okay. This is the second source that I want to look at. And it says the following. It's from the Gemara in Erevin on Samachei Amud Beis. And the Gemara says the following thing: B'shloshet devarim adam nikar. By 3 things, a person is recognized. You can determine who he is or who she is, what they're like. Most, I guess, when you look at the ones that come up. But it says the following thing: B'koso, b'kiso, b'ka'aso. V'amrele af b'shchako. Also, what a person laughs at, how a person looks at things, basically. So, what the Gemara is saying is that these 3 particular things, I don't know if more, there's actually a lot more that you can use to analyze people and see what they're all about. But it's specifically focusing on these 3 things. The question is why these 3 things. And the Gemara itself is not 100% clear. It just sort of sounds like it's got like a rhythm to the kosa, which means cup, person's kosa, person's cup, meaning how a person drinks. What a person's like with their alcohol. I'm not talking about apple juice and things like that. We're talking about things that cause a person to become inebriated. How a person behaves in such a state, whether they allow themselves to get to such a state of consciousness and how they behave once they do. The second thing is bekiso, through a person's wallet, through a person's pocketbook, through a person's billfold, whatever you want to call it, meaning that how a person deals with money. That's another important indicator of a person's midas, person's character traits. We'll have to see exactly what that means. And the third one is bakasa, which means through the way they get angry. If they get angry at all, first of all, and what they get angry about and how they display their anger. These are 3 things specifically. And the last one does not sound like the other 3, but they add to it the way a person laughs, what a person laughs, what they find funny. These are the first 3 are the ones that count the most. Specifically, these 3 things that allow us to be able to understand where a person's holding. From the Gemara, it just seems like it's because of the fact that they sound alike. And you can kind of remember. It's like one of these mnemonic things where you choose something that sounds alike or there's the same gematria, something that clues you into the other ones that follow. That's all it sounds like, because koso, kiso, kaso. But it turns out that these are very specific because of what they represent, and also because of the fact that they have something in common and something not in common, and those both tell about what they are and about the person themselves. So the first one is koso, right? And the vav at the end of the word doesn't really count because of the fact it's only making it possessive. The main word is kos, kis, and kas. Those are the words. So obviously what they have in common, you can see over here, right? The chaf samach, where you have the bottom here, right? And I believe the yud k for the time being. But they have that in common, these 2 letters. What do these 2 letters mean? Theoretically, nothing. At first, they're just 2 letters that are part of these words. But if you look into the Chumash, you will find they actually do show up, but not seemingly connected to this at first until we talk about it. And where does it show up? So it shows up at the end of Parashat B'Shalach. At the end of Parashat B'Shalach, the Jewish people had just received man from Shemayim. They complained to Hashem that they had no food, and they got the man that came down from Shemayim, which is great. And now at the end of the Parsha, the water runs out. And they come to Moshe Rabbeinu, and they say to Moshe, we have no water, which is fine. They didn't, why not? Just, all these miracles taking place. They should come to Moshe and say, so what's next? We asked for food, and the man came down, the bread came down from Shemayim, this mystical, magical food from Shemayim, but now there's no water. So now what? Where does the water come? We can't wait to see where the water comes from. What kind of miracle does God have in store now? But they don't ask that question. Not like that. Instead, they say to Moshe Rabbeinu, Hayesh Hashem birkerbenu im ayin? Is God amongst us or not? That's the question that they seem to ask. And then immediately after that, it says, V'yavo Amalek. Now, we wouldn't know that the question they're asking is so bad, except for the fact that Rashi points out, or he explains, why is the attack of Amalek here? What's the connection of the war that Amalek began at the end of Parshas B'Shalach? Such a terrible war that God personally swears to be at war with Amalek until the end of the generation. So Amalek is completely eradicated. Amalek is the only people that we have to get rid of so completely that once he's gone, once they're gone, then you can't even have a single belt, nothing. Any other nation, any other people that tax us, and we go to war against them, we can take the booty. If we defeat them, we're successful, we can keep the booty, not a problem. Right? The only nation that's not true of is Amalek. As long as there's a single Amaleki alive, then we can. But the moment that Amalek is completely destroyed, then every last possession of Amalek must also be destroyed. Why? So that no one should say that donkey once belonged to Amalek. That belt, that shoelace complete eradication. Amazing. I mean, it's like, why God is so angry, so upset that Amalek more than Esav, more than Yishmael, this is why Mordechai and Esther, even though Achashverosh gave all of Haman's possessions over to Mordechai to do what he wanted, he wouldn't take it. Now, technically speaking, he could use it. He could take it because Amalek was not completely destroyed yet. But as a result of this, because of this whole halacha, Amalek still he wanted to keep it separate. Didn't want to take any of the booty from Amalek, which was Haman at that time, and not just Haman, but all the Amalekis that were there at the time with him, fighting on his behalf. They all got destroyed. They all got killed at that time. But it also, I once heard a shir that used this idea specifically to explain the Haftarah. The Haftarah that we read this week's Parashat is Parashat Zachor, and as a result of that, we changed the Haftarah to a Haftarah about the war against Amalek that's waged by Shaul Melech on the mitzvah from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. God tells Shmuel Hanavi to tell Shaul to go to war against Amalek to completely eradicate them. That was the mitzvah. It was the time to do it, finally. And what happens? Classic. Yachamol Shaul. He had mercy on Agag. They killed every single Amaleki in that battle. They were completely successful, but he didn't kill the king Agag. Some say that's where the word Gog comes from, right? But they didn't kill Agag. And he's bringing back all these sheep, and he shows up, and he says to Shmuel and Navi, look, we're successful. Hashem gave us Hatzlacha. We were able to defeat the entire Amaleki people. And Shmuel goes, yeah, but what are all the sheep I hear? What are all that animal noise I hear? There shouldn't be any animal noise. Where's it coming from? Oh, well, we brought back all the sheep from Amalek in order to be able to offer them to God as thanks for the success we had in battle. Well, how did you do that? Well, we kept King Agag alive. So what we're going to do is we're going to sacrifice these animals to God, and then we'll kill Agag. Believe me, Shaul did not like Agag. He couldn't wait to kill him. But more than wanting to kill him, he wanted to sacrifice these animals to God. He knew that if he killed Agag, that's the last Amaleki, and therefore all the booty, all the animals, all the possessions, they had to be destroyed. So he couldn't offer them to God anymore because it would be forbidden. So therefore he had this idea where he would, like a loophole, he'd keep God alive a little bit longer, sacrifice to God, all the Shem Shemaim, all altruistically. And Shmuel says to Shaul the famous words, the famous lines, what do you think matters more to God? Do you bring all these sacrifices or that you do what he says? He gave you a simple commandment, wipe out Amalek. He doesn't want these animals. And this is what basically cost Shaul Melech and his family the Malchus, the kingdom. At this point, it goes over to David Melech, anyhow, which is meant to be. But this was the straw that broke the camel's back. It was the second major mistake that he made. But it all comes down to this halacha of every last Amaleki having to be destroyed and all their property as well. What did Amalek do that was so bad? Well, the Torah says he was the first one. He didn't have fear of God. He attacked the Jewish people, the stragglers, but still something more over here. So Rashi says it's connected to the Parsha, what came before it, the water, because when the Jewish people asked the question, is God amongst us or not? That brought Amalek. That was the main sin, the grace of Vera that they did that stimulated Amalek to uproot themselves from the Negev of Eretz Yisrael, travel hundreds of miles to attack the Jewish people in the middle of nowhere. They were feeding. Because they asked this question. Now, the question to ask on their question is, what were they asking? How is it possible? How is it possible? The Ananei Kavod, the clouds of glory are right there. The man just fell, and it's still falling. And the miracle of Erev Shabbos, they got a double portion, and it didn't rot. It's clear that God is there. There's no question, right, at all. And yet, they asked the question. So Kabbalah explains they weren't asking, is God amongst us or not? They were asking a far deeper, more profound question. Literally, Hayesh Hashem b'kirbeinu im ayin means is Yud Kei Vav Kei Havaya amongst us, or ayin. Ayin, it turns out, is one of the names of God, but it's the name of God that refers to a level of his divine providence is so high up, it does not depend on whether they do mitzvahs or averas. He does the miracle. All the miracles that took place to free the Jewish people from Egypt were done on the level of ayin. So what the real question the Jewish people were asking was not, is God amongst us or not, but they're asking which level of providence. Are we going to go into the desert, and if we do mitzvahs, we'll get miracles to keep us going, and if we do sins, God will withdraw his divine providence and we'll die in the desert. It's a dangerous place. There's no water, no food. Right? Are we going to be on, the entire time being judged by God? Who can stand up to God's judgment? Or will we have miracles happen for us in the desert anyhow, just like in Egypt, where we weren't worthy for them, and therefore we have nothing to worry about as we travel in the desert? We make a mistake, God's not going to cut us off. He's going to accept. That's the question that they're basically asking. And then as a result of that, they weren't even allowed to ask that question. So Rashi says, Amalek attacked. Why? Because they, after all that God had done for them and proven himself, God said, I showed you that you should know. After all that they had witnessed, and they're asking this question, where's that coming from? So therefore, Amalek attacks. Why does Amalek attack? He attacks because the gematria, the numerical value of the word Amalek, is equal to the Hebrew word Safek, which means doubt. So what happened when the Jewish people allowed themselves to doubt God's divine providence, they created Amalek. Amalek was a nomadic people minding their own business, but they were made for the job. Just like the snake in the Garden of Eden was made for that job. You see that certain people have a propensity for good or for evil. So Amalek, they represent doubt in divine providence. So when they had doubt in divine providence, that created the reality of Amalek. In a sense, it attacked them. Their own doubt attacked them through the presence of Amalek. And at the end, they go to war, they fight a battle, and they learn their lesson, more or less, and they humble Amalek by wiping out the strongest parts of Amalek, leaving over some because apparently we didn't have the merit yet to wipe out Amalek completely. And when God is, saying, I want this to remember it, I'm at war with Amalek for all generations until Amalek is finally completely eradicated. That's what it says, right? And the language that the verse uses, Yad al Keska, the hand of God, Kevayochel, is on his throne, because when we take an oath in Judaism, just like they do in the non-Jewish world too, right? I got it from us. that you have to hold on to a holy object so that it lends some kind of fear that you won't lie, you won't cheat. So people hold the Sefer Torah, sometimes they hold the tefillin. It depends on the oath. But what's God going to hold? He's the holiest thing there is. So therefore, God holds onto his throne, so to speak, as a sign of the power of his oath. And he says that my hand is on my throne. Now, where do we see throne? The word kisei, which of course is a chair, is also the word that's used for throne. But if we look over here, it only says case. And we have chaf samech. And not just that, it really should say kisei yud ke vav ke. Kisei Hashem. It doesn't do that. It says Kes Ka. The Aleph is missing, and the Vav He of Hashem's name is missing too. Prompting Rashi to bring a medrash and first ask the question, where's the letters? Did the sofer run out of space or something? Not enough ink? He was conserving? And why do we, what's being left off over here? So he says, no, because what it's really telling you is that Hashem is saying to the Jewish people and to the world that until Amalek is eradicated, my kisei is not complete. My throne will not be complete. My name is divided. Amalek divides the name of Hashem. How does he do that? Because he can't really do that, but he does it in the minds of people. How does he do that? By creating doubt in the minds of people in Hashgacha Pratis. When a scientist gets up and says, I can show you how you can have creation without God involved. You don't need to believe in God to have creation. He's creating doubt in divine providence. When a general gets up, and says, we won this war, not because of miracles, but because of the fact that we have a very strong army, and he takes away the credit from God and the miracles, that's Amaleki. He might be Jewish, but it's Amaleki. That's what Amalek does. So the Aleph is missing from Kisei because of the fact that God's throne is not complete as long as the doubt is in the world. And the Yud K is telling us that the Vav K is missing also until Amalek is gone, because the Vav K, which is Vav He, corresponds to the world that we live in, and the Yud He corresponds to the upper world, Shemayim basically. And what Amalek is doing is making a separation between Shemayim, heaven, and earth, saying very simply, what goes on down here is random. What goes on down here is not divine providence. There's none. It's just circumstance and happenstance and whatever. So, b'mikra. So that's why, if you look at this week's Parsha, I didn't time it this way, but it works out this way perfectly. You look at this week's Parsha, and you will find that the very first word of the Parsha is the word Vayikra. We just began a new sefer called Vayikra. And the first parsha is Vayikra. The first word, of course, is Vayikra. And if you look in the Sefer Torah, you'll find a few places where sometimes the letter is big, and other times where the letter is small. And in this case, the last letter of the word Vayikra, the Aleph, is small. And it always means something. Again, it's not because the sofer is cutting corners or got generous with the ink. Depends on the. It means something. The Kadosh Baruch Hu told Moshe Rabbeinu that when you write a Sefer Torah, here's how you do it. This Aleph has to be smaller than the rest of the letters. And why is that? So we learn, Rashi brings down, explains right there in the very first verse. He says, if you look at stand back, look at the word Yikra with a small Aleph, and what do you see? You see the letters Vav, Yud, Kuf, Resh. Vayikar. Vayikar. With the Aleph, it's Vayikra. But without the Aleph, it's Vayikar. Right? What's the difference? One letter, all the difference in the world. Huge. It's like literally polar extremes. Vayikar over here to the far left, literally, and Vayikra over here to the far right. And how's that played out? So Rashi says, you see that when God appears to Bilam and gives him his prophecy, he uses the word Vayikar. He chanced upon him, so to speak. In other words, he couldn't control the prophecy. He didn't know it was coming. He had no, connection to Kosh Baruch Hu, nothing personal. The only reason why Bilam had prophecy was for the sake of the Jewish people. So, in a sense, it was a very random thing for Bilam. He had no control over the relationship whatsoever. On the contrary, but a negative relationship with the Kodesh Baruch Hu. But Yikra is the lashon, the language of angels calling one another to praise God. So when it says V'yikra, right, Hashem Moshe, that Hashem called Moshe Benu, it means that he had a relationship. So the word V'yikra implies a closeness, a connection to God. V'yikar is just the opposite. And that's what Amalek does. Amalek creates this reality. He comes and he attacks the Aleph. So that's why the Aleph is missing from the word Kisei, because that's what Amalek attacks. He tries to transform the V'yikra into V'yikar. And that's what the Chav Sam comes to teach us. It hints to tell us this. And we'll see how it plays out, all the three words. But that's the common denominator. There's Chav Samach in the Koso, there's Chav Samach in the Kiso, there's Chav Samach in the Kaso. Each one is either transforming the person into V'yikra or V'yikar. That's all life is about over here. The entire Sefer Torah comes down to, the entire life and tikkun of a person comes down to this one idea. Are you holding by V'yikar or are you holding by V'yikra? Like an example, right? An example would be, right? It could be obviously a person who doesn't believe in God, doesn't believe in Torah, and doesn't believe in divine providence, by definition, is on the level of V'yikar. They nothing to do about that. That's until they do tshuva. But what about a person who's supposed to be in the level of a Yikra? They're wearing kippah, tzitzis, they're davening to Hashem 3 times a day. What about them? Well, this is a very simple test. Anytime something happens to you, and that's why, for example, the words Gamzu L'Tova, this too is for the good, is so important. Because Gamzu L'Tova is not just like, turn the other cheek type of a thing. Gamzu L'Tova, this too is for the good, is a way of acknowledging that whatever just happened, whoever just did to me, whatever's going on, it's Hashem. Right? We spoke about last week how Ara Haman and Baruch Mordechai in Gematria are equal. It's all Hashem. So, for example, I watch the news. If I watch the news and I see something going on that really disturbs me and I get all upset and angry. Now, it depends. If, like Pinchas ben Elazar ben Arda Cohen in the Chumash, his anger is completely for Hashem, on behalf of Hashem, that's a good thing. But if it's my own personal anger, like, if I could, I always joke around and say it's a good thing I don't know Kabbalah Smaisius, practical Kabbalah. And if I could use, words to curse people and take them out of the picture, half the world would be missing right now. Because I wouldn't be able to control myself. It'd be too emotionally involved. It takes me a while, like most people, before it sinks in to go from my head to my, to my heart. So I'm going to Shemai. It's all HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So as long as a person allows anything else but Hashem in this world to catch their attention and make them believe that they have the power to do the evil, independent of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that's V'yikar. That's not V'yikra anymore. Whole different reality. So Koso, right, the first one, when a person gets drunk, then you can really see sometimes where they're holding. You meet people who get drunk and they lose themselves completely. They act the exact opposite of a Torah Jew. They don't display a closer connection to Kodesh Baruch Hu. They become more distant. They become very non-from, so to speak. And then you meet people who, if they're drinking, they become inebriated. On the contrary, they have this tremendous desire and they become uninhibited in their love of Hashem. So the drink, it's a way of neutralizing the body, which is why it's so important in Purim, to allow the soul to come out. If the person drinking allows their soul to reveal itself, that shows they're on the level of V'yikra. If it doesn't, just the opposite, that's V'yikar. I mean, I've seen people drink on Purim and walk up to buses and try and pull the door off, right? Or punch people out, or drive recklessly, or it's like that's all V'yikar. That's not V'yikra. The second one is kiso, money, mammon, right? If a person has difficulty using their money in a meaningful way, if they're stingy, if they're protective, overly protective, if they act as if I don't watch my money, I will be without it. Obviously, halacha tells you, how to responsibly deal with your money. But to become overly committed to it, over to the point that it controls you, that you're meshubah to it. That was the difference between Yaakov and Esav. Yaakov says to when they meet finally, they're talking about the gifts and about money and the blessings and all that. And Yaakov says the famous words, Yeshli kol, I have everything I need. And Esav says, Yeshli rav, meaning I have a lot, but not everything. He's got tons. The Gemara says a person has 100, he wants 200. He's got 2 and he wants 400. So if a person understands that they're more like a bank teller, in the old days, not so much today, but I remember when I was younger, you walk into the bank and you almost felt guilty asking to withdraw your money. The bank teller made you feel often as if you were taking their money and they were doing you a favor in the end. But the reality is, they're just the tellers. It's your money, and they're giving it to you and you're asking for it. So the same thing, everything we have, all the property we have, all the possessions we have, they all come from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We have an obligation to use them in a meaningful way. We have an obligation to take care of what we were blessed with, but to the point that we become selfish with it, that shows that we're holding on the level of a yikar, kilu, as if that we're responsible. If we don't do the work, we won't get it. All the blessing has to come to us. Yes, you have to make some type of hishtadalus. You have to make an effort. You have to provide Hashem with the base for him to give his blessing. You do a little bit so he can add a lot. Sometimes, it's a famous joke about the person who goes to Shemaim. It says to Kosh Baruch Hu, right? Why didn't I win the lottery? I mean, some people, won it twice. I didn't win it once. And Hashem says, you didn't buy a ticket either. You got to buy a ticket. It's like, I could give you the lottery, but would it be a little bizarre if they announced the winning ticket and you don't have one and somehow you win it anyhow? That's not the way it works. You have to first make that effort to do something, and then the Kosh Baruch Hu will add his blessing to it against all the odds. There are literally Rabbanim in the past who used to buy lottery tickets or do something, even though the odds of winning were so incredibly, slim, but they were just providing God with an avenue to give them the blessing that Hashem might want to give to them. So that's kiso. If a person is meshubah, if they are bound by their money, if they believe that they have to control it to the point that they have to be stingy and they have to be overly protective, that shows that they're not real with the concept that it all comes from Hashem. Back to Vayika versus Vayikra. The last one is kaso, anger. The Gemara says a person who gets angry is ke'ilu of the avodah zarah, as if they worshipped idols. How does that work? So imagine somebody, if you read my Parashat sheet, this is an example I use there as well, right? That imagine a person, comes driving a brand new car, and all of a sudden someone hits them from the back. They weren't paying attention, or they stopped too short, and whatever, happens all the time. People drive too close. I almost saw it this afternoon when I was walking down to shul. Someone was too close behind somebody else and came within inches. They were very fortunate there was no accident in the end. When a guy hits the back of a brand new car, it's the first scratch, the first dent. You get out of your car and you see he's holding his phone, right? Meaning that he was probably looking at his phone and he wasn't paying attention to the road. And so, why aren't you more careful? It's my brand new car. I have a $500 deductible, and you get all angry. And you tell him how irresponsible he was for the way he was driving. He was apologetic, and he started, no, I'm sorry. You have to, it's more than that. And all of a sudden, in the midst of this argument, in the midst of this, you're complaining, a voice comes down from Shemaim that unmistakably is a bus call. It's clearly a heavenly voice that says, I made him hit the back of your car. And it's God. There's no question about it. It's not Hollywood projecting some voice, or somebody pretending. This is clearly God saying, I caused this to happen. What are you going to say? Excuse me, God, I'm in the middle of an argument right now. I'll get right back to you in a second. This guy hit the back of my, okay, so whatever, but he's responsible. Yeah, you're right. He'll have to answer to God why God used him specifically to do this damage. But if you hear a voice come down from Shemayim, and that voice says, I am the one who made you have to suffer this humiliating and expensive damage, what are you going to say? Oh, why? What did I do to deserve this? What must I fix up? What have I done wrong? It's hashgacha pratis. So we don't get that very often. It would be nice if God would tell us the things that He's doing. We're not holding anymore. Once upon a time, we had prophecy, and everybody was a prophet. And you could go to a prophet and ask, why God did this to me, and you find out and fix things up. Today we don't have that, so things just happen to happen. People lose money in the stock market. People steal. People, suffer damages. Make mistakes, and all of these things. And it's all so easy to get angry. But how you get angry determines whether or not you're holding the level of a yikra. It's all from Hashem. It's all min Hashemayim. So that's the chaf samach. That's the chaf samach, and that's what they have in common. What they don't have in common, as you see inside the circles over here, there's a vav, and there's a yud, and there's an ayin. And if you add them up, 70 plus 10 plus 6 is equal to 86, which is the gematria of Hashem's name Elokim. And that's the difference between the Yikar and the Yikra. That's the entire difference. How's the difference? Well, if you open the beginning of Sefer Shmos, Moshe Rabbeinu is coming to free the Jewish people, right? He comes to Paro, and he says to Paro, I've come in the name of Hashem to tell you that God plans to free the Jewish people. Let them go. Let my people go. And Paro says, nothing doing, right? Me Hashem. That's his quote. Me Hashem. Now, does he mean I don't believe in God? Well, they believed in God. In those days, everyone believed in God. Or gods, but they believed in something, right? So he says, me Hashem. But as Rashi explains, he wasn't saying, I don't believe in God or the Jewish God. He wasn't saying that. He was saying, I believe in Elokim. But Yud Kei Vav Kei, I don't know. I don't believe in that. What's the difference? It's all God, isn't it? So the gematria of Elokim is also the word Hateva, which means nature. So Chazal, the rabbis explained, and we spoke about this several times, back at Avram the Keda, it runs through, Chanukah time, it's all the same idea. This is relevant to Purim. And Chazal explained that the difference is that Elokim is the divine province of Hashem, but working in a way that gives you the impression there's a thing called Teva, which means nature. The gematria, the numerical value of the word Hateva, which means that nature, is equal to Elokim, not coincidentally. Elokim, Paro is saying, I believe in. I believe that God brought the flood, 100%. He wiped out all of mankind at that time, except for Noach and his man, because he brought a flood. But Elokim works b'derech teva. He works through nature. What does that mean? It means the following thing. Take a look, Moshe Rabbeinu. Take a look. We have the mightiest army in the world at this time. What do you have? You have no army. And the Jewish people even say to Moshe Rabbeinu, how can we go out? We have no army. We can't fight them. And the only other way out of here is by miracles. And miracles you have to earn. So we don't have that either. So how can we possibly go out of Mitzrayim no, not possible. And Paro says, I don't care what you're going to say, but since God, whom I believe in, only works through nature and we have the power, so therefore I'm going to assume that I'm safe and get lost. And the Jewish people are not only not going out, I'm going to increase the slavery. So Moshe says to Paro, well, you're about to find out who Hashem actually is. Me Hashem, you ask? You'll know. By Makkis Bacharis, maybe even a bit before, you will know who Hashem is. Well, who's Hashem? Hashem is the supernatural hashgacha pratis, this level of divine providence where God steps into history and overtly tampers with it and does things for the sake of the purpose of creation and the Jewish people. And if he needs to, and certainly it seems that's the case, he'll turn the Nile River into blood. And if you tell me, well, my Egyptians, magicians can also do that, I'll say to you, turn it back. And you won't be able to, but I will. That's Hashem. And if you tell me, okay, fine, I'm still not impressed, so I'll send frogs. We can also do frogs. What about keening? What about lice? No, that we can't do. And Arav and Dever and all these other plagues that increase the reality of Hashem in the world, because each plague is more miraculous than the previous one. So as we go from plague 1 to plague 2 to plague 3 to plague 4, we're actually moving away from Elokim, which is B'derech Teva, nature, to the level of Havai at the end, where even Paro says, I believe, I'm a believer, right? And you can go out and do whatever you want, just do me a favor, pray for me, because I see that God is somebody who, or something, whatever, will also, if he has to interfere in history and change and work against nature, work l'malam min tava, supernaturally. So that's why Chazal specifically chose these three things, kiso, kasa, v'koso, to explain to us that these three things are teaching us the message, it's not just telling you how to determine the measure of a person, including yourself especially. It's a way of telling you what is the measure of a person. It's not just whether a person's polite, that's important. Derech eretz, hugely important. That you're on time for davening, fantastic. That you daven with intention, absolutely important, essential. All these things tell us about you and tell you about yourself, without question. But these three things make the point that it all comes down to this little aleph at the beginning of this week's parsha, at the end of the very first word that transforms Vayikar into Vayikra. So that's really essentially what Purim is all about. Purim Nahafachu is coming, which means everything's turned upside down, right? It's going this way, and all of a sudden becomes this instead. But the reason why it does that, why would Hashem actually work that way? Because he's trying to educate the Jewish people at that time and for all history about how we have to understand that the level of Elokim, it might more or less be there on a daily basis, but what distinguishes the Jewish people from the nations of the world is the ability to recognize the level of Hashgacha Pratis, that's the level of Havayim. We're able to put the Aleph on the V'yikar and make it V'yikra, and have that personalized relationship with the Kodesh Baruch Hu. So I've mentioned the story in the past in advance of Purim, and forgive me if it sounds repetitive, but I think it's such a beautiful story that makes the point so clearly that we have to understand, this is what Purim is all about. And we'll talk a bit more about it next week as well, B'ezras Hashem, but the idea is like this. They once asked Rav Hutner Sitzal, who was a rabbi, the Rosh HaShavua, the Gadol Hador at the time of Chaim Berlin in New York. He was actually the one who was on, I think it was Black September, like that, when they had the plane was hijacked. He was on the plane that landed in Jordan, and he lost, I think, some of his writings in the end, but eventually published Pachad Yitzchak and others for him. Very famous, brilliant, deep mind. And one of his Talmidim once asked him, what's the point of drinking in Purim? Now, it shouldn't have been a question, but it was. And they asked the question. And the answer he gave, what I read, I think it was in the Jewish Observer, was a mashal. And he gave an analogy. And the analogy was of two boys growing up in a small town together in the old days, before there was, big cities, and it was like a shtetl in the 1800s. And they were best friends from a very young age. They went to cheder together. They went to yeshiva ketana together. They became chavrusas. They learned day and night together. Eventually got to the point of marrying age. In those days, it was very common, as it is today, to try to marry off a child to a wealthy, father-in-law. So hopefully that son can sit and learn. And it happened. It's a story, right? But it turned out that one was engaged to a girl whose family lived east, far east, not east of China, but east of where they were living in Europe. And the other one was engaged to a girl who lived, to the west. So they had to move in completely different direction from each other. And they got married. In the beginning, they sent letters back and forth, but in those days, the mail service was very slow. They didn't take trains, expensive, too far. They began to build up their own community. They became rabbis of the communities, and literally years go by, and probably even decades go by. And after a while, you forget, out of mind, out of sight, out of mind. And besides, they were busy with their community responsibilities, and they're busy with their families and raising their own children. And it just happened to be, as divine providence would have it, they were both on a train that ended up at the same station at the same time on their way back home where they're going. And they pass each other, but by now they have long white beards, and they've got, kapota, long coats, and the hat, and all. They look like Rosh Hashivas. Much older. In those days, you didn't send pictures back. There's no social media to share your progress as you grow older. And they walk past it. They literally walk past each other. But, somehow there's a sense of recognition. Something, tells you that maybe there's a person there, and they both stop in the tracks and turn around, look at each other, and they realize who they are, who each one is. David, Moshe, right? And they're so in shock and so excited that they literally just drop their bags without thinking where they are, and they run and they embrace. And they literally walk to sit down on the bench, embracing each other, as if letting go means they're going to have to leave. And they start talking very quickly, if it's her, but finally, after 5 minutes, they hear a train whistle. And they look at each other, and he says, "Which way are you going?" "I'm going east." "Which way are you going?" "I'm going west." "No, how is it possible? After all this time, we haven't seen each other for years and for decades, and who knows if we'll see each other again in the future. 5 minutes is not enough. So one says to the other, "Listen, I bought this bottle of wine, which I was going to save for Shabbos, but I have an idea. I think it's more important. You take a glass of wine, and I'll take the bottle. You go to your conductor and give him to drink. I'll take the bottle to my conductor and get him drunk, and no one's going anywhere for at least a good hour." I doubt that really happens in real life, but the mashal's the mashal. And they do exactly that, and the trains get stuck, and they have a whole hour and a half, 2 hours to catch up on their previous lives until they got to that point. So Rav Hutter was saying, the Nimshal, Rav Hutter was saying that, we come to this world as souls, right? And that's who we are in essence. The very first page of Shar HaGilgulim, the gate of reincarnations, makes this point, that our body is like clothing. It's not, we look in the mirror every single day, and what do we see? We see a body. If you look really close into your eye, it's a little spooky, but you realize that they're just like windows. That's all they are. It's like your eyes are not you. We look at people from a distance, we see personality in people's eyes. We look at a body, we see the body. We recognize a person. We don't see the soul necessarily. It's a very hard thing to do because, first of all, people block it. And second of all, we're not trained to see it. We respond to one another differently if we could. And the life that we live is so complex and so distracting. Amalek makes sure of that we get so bogged down by material needs and material wants and material concerns that we can't help but live a physical existence. So thank you, Baruch Hashem, today, people who keep Torah mitzvahs, they still go to shul and they daven, put on tefillin, but it lacks the heart and it lacks the soul. Even the learning that we do is a little bit superficial compared to what it once was. Because that's life in this world. It's very hard. You have to work. Anybody who does things differently works at it. It takes mesiras nefesh, self-sacrifice. And that's all year round. So Purim says, take a day off. Take a day off in the physical world. Take some wine, drink it to the point you don't care anymore what happened yesterday, and you don't care anymore what's going to happen tomorrow. You only care about today. For one day, be a neshama. Free your soul, right? Stop living in the level of a yikar and get back to the level of a yikra. And while you're at it, right, meet up with the other souls. Start looking at the people around you as souls. Deal with them, treat them as souls, connect as souls. And it's a whole different world. It's an amazing thing. Amazing thing. It's like walking into a big, huge party, right? Walking into a huge party and finding all kinds of people standing around, glasses in hand, wine, alcohol, whatever, food, schmoozing about this and talking about business. And you figure, no, it's just a social gathering. And you keep walking through the room, you see one guy sitting at a table. One guy sitting at a table, literally not part of any of this. No drink, no food, nothing. Just sitting there with a pen and a piece of paper. And he's writing. And you walk over to me and say, "What are you doing?" Everybody else seems to be having a good time. They're all enjoying themselves over here, all involved, all kinds of things. What are you doing? The guy says, he says, I came in, and as I walked in, all of a sudden occurred to me, there's a famous, interrupt this story for a famous story. Well, let me finish the story first, right? He says, this idea, this concept that came to me about an idea on the Chumash, on the Parashat, that for years I had this question, and all of a sudden, as I'm walking in, it occurred to me that what the answer might be, and I didn't want to forget it, so I immediately came and sat down, got a piece of paper, got a pen, and began writing down. And you look at it and say, wow, everybody here, 150 people, standing around doing what? Nothing that really counts that much. Fun, for sure. Pleasure, 100%. But reward in the world to come. And this guy comes in and sits down. One out of 150 people, and he's writing down a chiddush of Devar here at this time. So that sounds a little far-fetched. Let me tell you a story. The Chazon Ish was making a shidduch for his sister. And the shidduch that he made was with the stipler. But at the time, it wasn't the stipler yet. And the stipler was a big Talmid Chacham from a very young age, came from Russia, and he lost his hearing. He was not completely deaf yet, but he had a hard time hearing. So how did he lose it? Well, he was once in Russia. It was freezing cold outside, and someone began to speak not exactly Lashon Hora, but it's a little bit like Lashon Hora, and he didn't want to hear it, so he went outside in the freezing cold to avoid hearing the Lashon Hora, and it damaged his hearing. From the rest of that point onward, he didn't hear so well. And basically, that was a lacking, or so his sister, or so the Chazon Ish's sister thought. And they arranged the date. They went out for their first date, and the first shidduch. And after the shidduch, the Chazon Ish said, "No, how did it go?" She says, "Not for me. He's not for me." So, maybe not for you. Why not? First of all, he doesn't know how to dress. He dresses like a shlumiel. It's like, clothing is not his thing in any way. Not that he's looking for fashion design, but he was a little sloppy. Second of all, he can't hear well. I spend half my time repeating myself. And the third of all, in the middle of the whole thing, he all of a sudden goes, the Rambam. It's the Rambam. And he starts going for a whole tangent about the Rambam, in the middle of our date. He's learning, this going through his head. That's the kind of person I want to marry? So the Chazon Ish smiled and he said, yes. He says, first of all, as to your first complaint that he doesn't address, well, teach him an address. That's not a big deal. He'll learn. When you get married, that's one of the things that marriage teaches you, how to take better care of yourself, hopefully. Second thing, that he can't hear very well, you should know, in short order, he will be heard of all around the world. They'll know about him. He'll be famous. And as the third thing, that he thought about the Rambam in the middle of a shidduch, specifically you should marry him. Why? Because if anybody at a time like that can think in learning and a chiddush comes to his mind, that's someone you should marry. That's a person that's connected to Kodesh Baruch Hu. So they did. They got married. Famous story. Maybe a little extreme for some people, but the idea is the idea. All of these things, kiso, kaso, koso, even schoko, the laughing, aspect of it, Purim comes to neutralize the goof, the body, the material world, to disconnect us for a day, so that we can rediscover our neshamas, to see who we are in essence. Because once you do that, you fly. I don't mean you're going to start flying around like an angel in the air, but you don't have to. You only have to fly in the physical world when you're stuck in the physical world. But every Shabbos, by keeping Shabbos properly, we go to a higher level. You don't go anywhere, but you go to a higher level that even the birds can go. Even flying physically can take you. And if you learn Gemara, it can take you to the level even above that. And if you learn Kabbalah, you can go even higher. The Gemara says 4 rabbis entered Pardes, the ultimate paradise, the ultimate orchard. But they didn't go anywhere. They just meditated on the name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. A person who lives on the level of the Yikar is stuck in this world, and they're missing the point of life. But the person who enlarges their aleph, now we'll talk about B'ezras Hashem next week and Pesach time, because Pesach is all about the whole redemption of a person has to do with his aleph. It's a little aleph. It's everything, right? A person who develops it and transforms the V'yikar into V'yikra, they're a free person. And not just a free person, because Baruch Hu can talk to the person. We can work at the person like that. You can rise above the physical reality that drags everybody else down, that disturbs them emotionally and intellectually. That's the das that Purim is coming to give to us. That's our avoda. That's our work. And B'ezras Hashem, next week, we'll continue with that. Good night.